House Oversight Chair James Comer says that he wants now Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and Attorney Alan Dershowitz to testify next as part of the House Oversight Committee's probe into Jeffrey Epstein. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, he faced questions just yesterday behind closed doors with the committee. And Gates said that the late convicted sex offender essentially tried to blackmail him. CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton is here with much more on this. Harry, tell us. How has the opinion of Bill Gates changed?
Yeah, the opinion of Bill Gates has changed tremendously since his associations with Jeffrey Epstein were learned about. And you could just see it right here. I mean, Bill Gates' net favorability back in 2018, there was perhaps no other American who was as popular as Bill Gates was. His net favorability rating was plus 74 points. But look where it was by 2025. Way down. What is that? That is a nearly 70-point drop way down there to just plus 6 points. And I've seen some non-Ipsos polling. These are Ipsos polls. I've seen some non-Ipsos polling to suggest that now Bill Gates' net favorability rating is now negative in the United States of America. Quite the steep decline from being one of the most well-liked Americans back in 2018 when he was 74 points on the positive side of the ledger.
How does that compare to the decline of opinion of other business leaders over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is just part of a larger story. And it just is part of a larger story, any association with Jeffrey Epstein. Take a look here. Say the Epstein files has lowered your trust in political and business leaders. You get the rare trifecta here. A majority of Republicans, 67%, independents, 73%, 86% of Democrats, 75% of all adults, a clear majority. You know, when I get off of air and I talk to people in the quote-unquote real world, the Epstein files is consistently brought up, and they believe it is part of just a larger story in which business leaders and political leaders are far less trusted than before.
Well, what else is the impact, Ben, of the Epstein files kind of on the opinions of the rich and powerful?
Yeah, exactly right. You know, it's part of this rich and powerful that they can get away with stuff. Take a look here. Epstein files show that powerful people are rarely held accountable. Again, the rare trifecta, 82% of Republicans, 80% of independents, 90% of Democrats, 84% of all adults. As I said, the Epstein files sort of matches what people believe out there, which is the rich and powerful can get away with stuff that other people simply can't.
So I mentioned Todd Blanche off the top, right? Where do the prediction markets put Todd Blanche in terms of the chances of being Trump's next attorney general?
Yeah, those chances are falling. Take a look here. Chances Trump's next attorney general, according to Kalshi prediction markets, back on June 8th, not so long ago, 71%. Now just a 63% chance. And keep in mind, there's a Republican Senate majority. So the fact that it's so low really is another indication of how potential sort of the connection of the Epstein files you don't want to be.
Oh, we heard this morning he's going to face a lot of questions about it. Yep. It's great to have you, Harry. Thank you for this one.
On Capitol Hill today, billionaire Bill Gates gave voluntary testimony behind closed doors about his ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Gates is referenced hundreds of times in the DOJ's Epstein files, which were released earlier this year. He's not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing, denies knowing about Epstein's crimes. He told lawmakers today that meeting Epstein was a grave error in judgment. More now from Randy Kay.
I'm glad to be here voluntarily to testify, to help with the committee's work.
Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates told the House Oversight Committee he was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein in 2011, and that the late convicted sex offender promised he could raise billions of dollars for global health. Gates has always denied any wrongdoing related to Epstein. Documents released by the Justice Department include several hundred references to Gates and reveal graphic, unverified allegations. Emails in the files detail meetings, meals, proposed phone calls, and attempts by Epstein to meet Gates. I enjoyed the breakfast a lot, Gates wrote Epstein in December 2014. Last December, the House Oversight Committee also released this photo from Epstein's estate. That's Gates with a woman whose face has been redacted. According to the documents, all the interactions with Gates occurred long after Epstein's 2008 conviction on prostitution-related charges. In February this year, Gates addressed the allegations.
You know, it's factually true that I was only at dinners. You know, I never went to the island. I never met any women. And so, you know, the more that comes out, the more clear it'll be that although the time was a mistake, it had nothing to do with that kind of behavior.
The documents released also included 2 draft emails Epstein appears to have written himself in July 2013. In them, Epstein seems to suggest he facilitated sexual encounters for Gates and helped Gates get medication to hide a sexually transmitted infection from his wife at the time, Melinda French Gates. In this email, Epstein claimed he'd helped Gates get drugs in order to deal with consequences of sex with Russian girls and illicit trysts with married women.
Apparently, Jeffrey wrote an email to himself. That email was never sent. The email is, false. So I don't know what his thinking was there. It just reminds me, every minute I spent with him, I regret and I, apologize that I did that.
This other draft email alleges Gates had tears in his eyes as he asked Epstein to delete messages referencing an STD and explicit personal details about his penis. The allegations contained in the draft email are unverified and uncorroborated. There is also no indication the message was ever sent to Gates. Bill Gates has not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing. Gates shared his regrets about meeting Epstein with Anderson Cooper in 2021.
It was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility of, being there.
In February, during an interview with NPR, Melinda French Gates addressed the issue.
Just unbelievable sadness. Unbelievable sadness. For me, it's personally hard whenever those details come up, right? Because brings back memories of some very, very painful times in my marriage.
Today, in his opening statement to the committee, Gates said, "I never witnessed nor had any indication that Epstein was engaged in ongoing criminal conduct. I never went to his island, his ranch, or his Florida home," adding, "I have never victimized anyone." Gates also testified that his interactions with Epstein ended in December 2014. Randy Kaye, CNN, Palm Beach County, Florida.
Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury. She sits on the House Oversight Committee and questioned Bill Gates today. What stood out to you from his testimony?
Listen, I think one of the things that was most interesting about Mr. Gates' testimony is that he knew all about Jeffrey Epstein's reputation. He knew about his sexual misconduct. And not only did he eschew that relationship, he actually actively sought it out. And I think that was one of the more stunning revelations from today's testimony. I think many of us were under the impression that maybe Epstein had reached out to Mr. Gates, that he had sought that connection because of his scientific interest. But what Mr. Gates revealed today is that he actively sought to try to make connections to Jeffrey Epstein in order to woo donors to donate to his international global health work. And so I think it is very hard for many people to understand how one of the most wealthy and powerful and influential men on planet Earth actively sought out a relationship with a known pedophile in order to actively solicit donations to his global health work. And so it's very troubling.
Do you think that's not the case? Do you think he had another agenda? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's what Mr. Gates told us today in the interview, that he personally sought out that relationship.
Do you believe that?
Yep. All I can, say is that is what he revealed today during his testimony. But I think the broader point here is that many people want to know, why were rich and powerful men, especially, and rich and powerful people in general, who understood the stakes and consequences of interacting with Jeffrey Epstein, actively engaging in relationships with him even after his initial sex offenses were prosecuted in the state of Florida. And I think what the interview with Bill Gates revealed today is that many of those individuals, including Bill Gates himself, saw some sort of advantage of forming a relationship with Mr. Epstein because of the immense amount of wealth that he had access to, and that there were many people who were willing to look the other way, including Mr. Gates himself.
Did Gates say anything about Epstein possibly using knowledge of Gates' extramarital affairs as a form of leverage or pressure? Because we should say again, Gates has not been accused of any criminal activity in connection with Epstein. He says his extramarital affairs had nothing to do with Epstein.
Yeah, so his testimony today in front of the Oversight Committee was that Mr. Epstein did not arrange any of his relationships with the women that he had extramarital affairs with, but he does claim that Mr. Epstein learned of his extramarital affairs through a common associate of his who was a scientist who was working as an advisor for Mr. Epstein and also working under the auspices of Mr. Gates, and so that he was trying to use that as some sort of blackmail or leverage. But one of the issues with the fact that the Republicans are holding these interviews not as depositions, not under oath, is that we have to take the witnesses' word for it and basically take their testimony as it's coming in. And so that is what he presented today in front of the committee, and that's what he testified.